Today on the show, we're talking with Faith Rothberg, CEO of College Recruiter, about the future of STEM careers in the female workforce. Faith's career has always been at the intersection between business and technology in her various roles for companies such as Ford Motor Company and KPMG. Her passion for helping young adults find great careers is evident in everything that College Recruiter does. This is The Career Cue, the podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Stacey Harris.
So Faith, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on the phone with us today. We're really excited about this conversation.
Thanks, Stacey, for having me. I am really excited about it as well, as this is really an area I'm quite passionate around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive right in. For those listeners out there that may not be familiar with STEM, do you mind just kind of giving folks a high overview of what it is?
Sure. So STEM is an acronym that actually stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And when people talk about STEM, they basically are referring to any of those technology, mathy kinds of careers.
And for the purpose of today's conversation, we're probably going to be more focused on the technology side of things. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah.
That's kind of my background, but I may throw in a thing or two about how it can also easily relate to engineering or math.
Oh, great. Okay. There's been a lot of discussion over the last few years about the importance of STEM, not only STEM in general, but females getting into STEM careers and going down the academic path of STEM. So we've seen some fantastic innovation that's come out of STEM careers. As it relates to technology that we're going to be primarily focused on today, what are some of the trends that we can expect to see both in the short term and the long term?
Yeah, this is really important for people to understand, because I think that right now these areas are the area of technology is just going to continue to grow and segment and continue to have even new majors in it as far as school goes and different kinds of career paths to follow. And so right now, there are actually many more job openings than there are candidates to fill those positions. And so with that high demand, it's really outweighing the supply of the people. One place that I saw some statistics is through Adecco, which is a human resource staffing agency. They state that by 2018, there will be 2.4 million unfilled jobs due to lack of people, and that's 75% of the fastest growing occupations right now require significant math and science preparation. So this large gap is due to that limited number of grads that we're talking about. And so there's huge competition for the candidates. All of the students that graduate with a 4-year degree, out of all of them, only 19% right now are going into STEM majors. Only 10% of those 19% actually take jobs in STEM. And then out of those, only 8% are staying in STEM. So these statistics are only going to grow unless we start making some efforts to help candidates, to help students, and especially female students as well, really get into these fields and stay in them. I think that a lot of young people see it as an option, especially young women, that in the sense that they love math and science and computers and all that stuff they learn in their years in high school. And then as they start to get further into it, they get turned off by the fact that there's not as many women in it. And so I think for me, it's a real passion to try and begin to support women as young as high school, really getting excited about it and staying in it.
Yeah, I would love for us to dig into those numbers a little bit more and, the attrition or the retention and attrition, obviously, because the goal would be increased retention, but there seems to be a challenge with the nutrition. But so let's actually step back a little bit and let's talk about how you got started, because it's clear as well that you have a true passion around this particular, not only the topic, but in servicing or providing a service to others to not only introduce them, but to encourage them and support them through their chosen journey in a STEM career. But let's talk about how you got into specifically technology.
Sure. So I'll be dating myself a little bit here, but I went off to college. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And as I was applying there, I needed to put down what my major was going to be. And as many young people know, you're not really sure when you're in high school. And so for some reason, I decided to look at the business school. And while I was doing that, my mom said to me, you're really good at math and science. You really like it. You should look at going into computers. Women in computers right now would be fantastic. It'd be really easy to get a job. And so I took that to heart. And when I started at school in the business school, I took my major as what was called at the time Management Information Systems. And that was basically IT for business. And so I began to have some of my first computer programming classes. I loved it because what I found was it was like putting together a puzzle. And I had always loved all sorts of puzzles. Using, when my brothers, when we were young, would read comic books for long car rides, I would be doing crosswords and word finds and all sorts of puzzles like that. And this felt like another puzzle, and it was really fun. So that's how I stepped into the major. And then when I took my first job out of school, I became a computer programmer for Ford Motor Company. I did find that I had several offers and was definitely wanted in the marketplace. And Ford had a great entry-level leadership development program for college grads. And so when I went there were over 25 of us, I think, that started that year. The second year, another 25. So we had quite our own group. And I became a computer programmer. And from there, I slowly realized that I enjoyed both the technology and people. And so my path went one way. Rather than becoming more and more technical, I went on to more of a project management track after that.
And so when you were in college, I would imagine that when you looked around, there weren't a lot of females that were tracking down that same path. Is that right? Or at the time, was there a larger influx than we're probably even seeing today?
No, actually, there were not a lot of women in my classes at all, although I would say that I had a little bit of a balance because of being in a business school, there were young women entering to be finance majors, things like that. So when I would go to these computer classes, no, it was mostly men. It was men teaching it. And for me, I realized it took me a long time to realize that I didn't have really an issue with that. And I think I almost didn't even really notice it a lot of times. And I know now, being in the workforce for a long time, that isn't the way that a lot of women go through and perceive it. And so that's become actually part of my passion in helping women get past that. I just saw everybody as people. I saw that what I love to do, I just wanted to do it. And so I never really let that get in my way. Sometimes to my detriment. I know, like in high school, it was kind of a common thing. People would say that girls tend to pretend they're not as smart as they are. And I really didn't know about that until many years later. And to my detriment, I didn't have many boyfriends in high school, but I did. I just always stuck with what I loved and what I enjoyed studying. So
well, and that ended up being beneficial, I'm assuming, also in addition to professionally, but also personally, right? It is looking around and not seeing men versus women. It's just we're passionate about the same thing, or we're all smart in our own ways, and we've all got our own paths to go down. It doesn't matter don't define me based on my gender, define me based on my value and what I can bring to the table. That's great. So,
Exactly.
well, so it sounds like, Faith, that one of the first kind of introductions regarding your STEM path would have been introduced to you or maybe kind of identified for you was by your mother, and that she was like, hey, you're interested in these kinds of things. Have you considered XYZ? Which is fantastic, right? Have there been other female role models or mentors that have helped you through your career or helped shape your career?
So this was a hard one for me to think back about, quite honestly. And I think it's because in the beginning, there weren't a lot of females that were actually role models or mentors. I would say that in my first job, when we all became computer programmers and I talked about that large group of people that were the same age, we did have a good share of women in that. And I think that probably made my first experience sort of less of an issue that there were not women in leadership, because I at least had this cohort of friends that were women that were also doing computer programming. I also had the fortune of having some really good men as managers who treated me well for my accomplishments or helped me grow in my profession. And I think that is something to always be very open to. As I got a little further in my career, I would say that I definitely have women peers that I've been able to talk to about, did you ever run into this situation? What'd you do when this happened? Other women managers who ran into problems with male bosses and how do we handle that? And I would say now I have mentors that are both male and female now. And there seems to be, which is great for me to see, a lot of interest among women to start pulling together. And I think that in the beginning, what was happening is that women had to fawn, scratch, and pretty much act like men to be able to get accepted and break some of the ceilings that they weren't able to break. And that over time, it got easier for women, and some of those habits didn't change, though, because of the people above them. So I am seeing a great deal of women coming together to mentor other women in technology, as well as, I own a business and run a business, and there are a lot of women entrepreneurs that are trying to really rally around supporting other women entrepreneurs. So it's definitely been a different phase of the movement for women.
It sounds like coming together in the development of community. And, whether
Exactly.
it's exclusive to female business owners or in the technology industry or not, right? Just
Right.
I've seen a lot of, similar growth that you're speaking of. And while the primary focus may seem that it is towards females only, and in actual fact, it's just so happens that, most of the people involved may be women. However, the door hasn't been closed for male inclusion. So, but it's great to see
Right.
that.
That's true too.
Yeah. It's great to see that there's more of a sense of how do we all kind of strengthen this message or this journey together versus individually trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, the reality is specifically the technology industry is still very light and there's a lot of room for growth. And especially with the numbers that you had indicated earlier about the amount of jobs that are open over the course of the next couple of years and that it really is going to be an industry that's just going to grow exponentially. What has your experience been both not only navigating the industry, but staying focused perhaps when female colleagues over the years have decided to move on for various reasons? I don't want to imply that, there's this one reason why females move on, but the reality is that women leave the workforce because they have babies or children, but that is, I believe, not because I have the research around it, but I believe that's a good percentage of why females perhaps leave these particular industries. Is that something that you've experienced, and or are we seeing that kind of data, or is it just a perception?
I think it's a little bit of both. I haven't looked at that specific data, but in my experience, I saw a lot of women go part-time for periods of time and or leave the industry. And I think that some women are afraid to come back into the industry because they think that they lost so many skills. It's interesting that you bring that up because I did take some time off when my kids were quite young. And the way I looked at it was that I have about 44 years or 45 years of working full time. And that if I take 5 to 10 years off somewhere in there, I'm still going to have 35 years to work. And so what I did was I went down to part-time with my first 2 children. And what happened was I was able to stay really involved and was in a place where I already had a good job. At the time I was working for what's now Wells Fargo Bank. And while I was working there and wanted to go part-time, I had already established myself. And so there were a number of managers that were willing to do that. And I went part-time. And as soon as I did that, I really started encouraging a lot of my friends to do that were at the same point. And what it did was it basically opened up people's eyes that they don't have to work straight through full-time to build a career. But if they work part-time, and some of them chose to work part-time and stay part-time until they went back full-time. So they really didn't miss too much. Yes, did they see some men get promoted before them? That is definitely something that happens. But if you have that long-term vision, when you come back full-time, you get your career, you jack up the importance of your career and start doing really well again, you can find your way to that position you want. I think that if most women have sort of their career path kind of idea in mind, most of them probably don't want to become the CEO of a company. If they do, they might make some different choices. If they don't, they can still become that EVP. So I think that is partly what happens. And I think for women to encourage other women, there's also women that would, I believe now, having been a stay-at-home mom for a while, would be not as good a mom staying home full-time. It would be better to work part-time or full-time and have some flexibility between their partner as to the time spent with the kids. So, but I do agree with you that I think that right now that is a trend that is, women are trying to support other in making some different choices around that, as I did when I was younger. And I think there'll be more support out there for that as we move forward, if women can support women.
That's great.
And men support women.
Right.
And men support women. Like, we're just starting our job board association, which would be the association for my company, the companies that offer similar services and products that College Recruiter does. There's not as many women in it. It's HR tech is basically what it is. Human resource technology is the group of people that always get together, and it's much more predominantly men still. But there was one woman who is an executive in one of the big job boards, and she reached out to a couple of us that are more senior and more visible in the organization and asked us if we wanted to start a lean-in circle. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Sheryl Sandberg, who's the CEO of Facebook, did a TED Talk and it was about women getting into the workforce and getting a seat at the table, basically, is what she said, and she called it Lean In. And so this woman who asked me to be a part of it, we're starting a Lean In circle specific to our job board association to help women that are in the same kinds of careers as us gain support from us, and also to encourage the men in our world to just open their eyes a little bit more about the gender bias that none of us realize we have sometimes, even women to women. So I'm super excited about that.
That's great. So it's starting the conversation and helping others understand that there is community out there. And it may take a couple of people to kind of formalize that community, but that with the accessibility that we have to to people that we don't necessarily run in the same circles with, either professionally or personally, right? But I would imagine that through this group, you're going to be introduced to women that you may not have necessarily run into in the course of your day, but they're going to be able to benefit from that relationship just as much as you will.
For sure.
That's great.
For sure.
Faith, that's great. I love to hear that people are pulling together community and providing resources and support to other like-minded people in order to be able to make them feel like they don't have to recreate the wheel or stand on an island by themselves and figure this out. So fantastic work that you're involved in, and we definitely want to be able to continue that conversation. We're actually going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about, for our listeners that are looking to get into technology or perhaps are currently studying or already find themselves in the technology field, what are some of the professional growth opportunities or first steps that they can take for further career development? So stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
Welcome back to the Career Q. Today we're speaking with Faith Rothberg from College Recruiter. Faith, before the break, we talked about your professional journey and your experience. But what I'd actually love to be able to focus on in this part of the episode is for the folks that are out there, you know, female or male. I mean, I don't think it's exclusive to female, but for the purpose of this conversation, we are definitely talking about females in STEM careers. But you know, we've got listeners out there that may be currently in the technology industry or studying and going down the path of technology. What would you recommend are some of the things available or that people should be looking into for the first steps if they're looking to get into technology and or professional growth for someone that may be already going down that path? Sure.
So the first thing I would say is if you're studying technology and you're enjoying it and you know that's what you want to do, you can be starting a multitude of things at the same time as you're in school. And what I would say is that it's really important in the area of technology to find some sort of ways to gain some real world experience, no matter how small. And so while you're studying, I would recommend definitely trying to get internships in the summer. There are many paid internships, especially for IT majors. And I would also think about working maybe part-time during school or a part-time job all summer if you don't find an internship or a full-time job where you can gain some experience, even if it's doing some minor things in a company that you're in the technology area, so that maybe you're not doing a ton of practical coding work or anything like that yet, but that you are engaged and around people talking about technology so you can start to learn how your degree is going to actually be used in the workplace. The other thing that I recommend to people, whether they're just starting out, whether they're still in school, but definitely for future career growth, is to really network with people. And when I say start networking with people, I don't really mean LinkedIn, although, you know, it's great from a professional standpoint to have a good profile out there and to connect with people in your industry or to look for groups where the group is talking about the industry you're in, or for women, if it's talking about women in technology, whatever. Those things are great, and they're great ways to get connected into your space. But when I talk about networking, I really mean interacting with people that are in the same area that you want to be in. And so when you're in school, you're not really working in it yet, but you can still be networking even with parents of your friends that are in the field, whatever. And, you know, have those, what they used to call informational interviews, offer to take someone to coffee to find out what it's like to work, what their job's like, what do they like about it, what's hard about it, what were things they didn't expect that they found after they got out of school. And for people who are in the industry already, this is invaluable for similar reasons, but also to, you know, if you have an idea, either if you don't have an idea of where you want your career to go, because there are so many paths in the technology industry, it's a great way to learn about what those paths would look like to figure out what you would be best at or what you would be most excited about. And it's also a great way to find opportunities in a very casual way, and potentially, take a big career step somewhere else through this networking with different people. So I would say never be afraid to contact anyone about taking them for coffee and asking them to talk about their job. Most people love to share that with other people, especially if they love what they're doing. So that's some of the things. The other thing when you're already in the profession that I would recommend is to find groups. For instance, if you're highly technical in certain coding languages, like for us, we have web developers and we code in PHP. There's a PHP user group at our state level. So there's a Minnesota PHP user group. There's a Twin Cities, which is Minneapolis-St. Paul PHP user group. And each of these groups, they not only offer networking and learning from each other, but they literally offer conferences where they have training and you can continue to gain professional knowledge and then bring that back to your organization, which of course is a great thing to do to improve the possibilities for your career at that company.
That's great. You had mentioned there are resources at the state level, and obviously at the national level as well. And obviously
at the national level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would imagine that for folks that maybe don't know where to start, I would imagine that there is a lot of resources available if you're a current student that it's approaching faculty and asking, some general questions about what are some of the resources available, or do they have someone that you'd be able to connect with if you've been able to identify the criteria or just even a loose criteria of what you're looking for, but perhaps looking around and seeing who might be in the industry locally, where you can actually, like you said, take them out for coffee. It may not necessarily be a long-term relationship, but it's something that you just get the conversation started and you walk away with just a little bit more information than what you walked in with.
Right. And what tends to happen too is even if that person only gives you a little bit of information based on the conversation you're having, they might say, but you know what? This person over here would be great for you to talk to. Mm-hmm. So it kind of perpetuates itself. The other thing I would say too about the professors, I think you're right. That's a great idea. And when you look at the college industry in general, one of the things that's happening is that it's becoming really important for all these schools to be able to show placement. That's one of the statistics people look at, how many people are graduating, what kind of jobs are they getting out of your school and out of your area as the faculty, if you're in, the computer science department or, the science and, biometrics department or whatever. So I think that professors have a real incentive, besides just hopefully caring about their students, to actually help you get on that path sooner rather than later and connect you with people they know or potential opportunities. Many of these professors do know people that are out in the working environment already and can help you get connected. So I think that's a wonderful idea. Another thing that we see happening too is that a lot of employers are leveraging those professors as well nowadays to say who are some of your best students in this area. And so if students are asking the professors and employers are asking the professors, well, they already have a clear path to kind of merging some of those conversations together. So I think that's really awesome.
Yeah. So if there's someone out there right now that may be, well established in their career in the STEM industries, that they perhaps want to pay it forward and be able to share their knowledge and experience with someone that's just kind of starting out their academic career or looking for their first post-college career experience as well. So this conversation is not only beneficial for college students that are currently studying, but folks that are out there that have something to offer someone that is in college and looking to understand how to navigate not only the industry in of itself, but also their professional journey. So, I mean, at the organizational level, does your employer have a relationship with a local university? And if they don't, is there an opportunity to start one at the organizational level, or you as an individual? Is there a group that you can insert insert yourself into, or even go out there and start one yourself if there isn't one that's already existing.
Exactly.
That's great. I love
Yeah.
the mentor. I love the mentor philosophy. Like, I believe that there's an opportunity for both formal and informal mentor relationships, and there's certainly kind of a recipe that you can follow, but at the same time, it's what you want that relationship to be, not only what you desire it to be, but allowing it to kind of grow organically, because you'd be surprised at what can come out for both sides that are involved in that relationship. I love that. So let's talk about, one of the questions that I personally have been asked over the years is the value of postgraduate degrees. And, for the purpose of this conversation, focusing on STEM careers, in your opinion, how critical is it to have a postgraduate degree?
So, and this is just my opinion. No, I don't have any statistics behind a lot of this, but what I would say is that I think that it's not that important in getting started in your career in STEM. I think that there are some professions where it seems that it's better to go straight through almost, because you just need, like social work, you just need that graduate degree. STEM is not like that at all. And so I think that the best thing to do is actually get some work experience before you would even decide whether to go to graduate school or not and get a postgraduate degree. Also, the other reason why I think it's helpful to not do graduate school right away is because there are so many paths you can take. I mean, you look at me, and I started as a computer programmer. I could have chose to go deeper into the technology and become an architect of, very complex systems. I chose to go the other way and be more on the business side. And given that, I would have chosen two very different master's degrees. So I think it's really helpful to take that first step, get some really good work experience, and have a little bit of an idea of where you want to go. The last thing I'll say about that too is that then when you do go to graduate school, I really feel, having done it myself, that you get much, much more out of it, having had some practical work experience. That when you're learning the new things that they're talking about in grad school, you've had some of the experiences that might be the foundation or basis for what they're talking about. And so you can take it that next level of critical thinking and understanding without, and just end up with a much better, full educational experience from it.
That's great. So, I mean, it's not a one size fits all, right? And it's really going to be what's best for you. But like you said, getting that real world kind of industry experience perhaps allows you to step into a master's, experience with a new perspective, and to be able to value the academics, and marry that practical experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
That's great. So, before we wrap up, there's two last questions that I'd love to be able to get some advice from you on. And the first one being, any advice that you'd give to female college students that are listening today that are looking at going down the STEM path, how they can continue to feel empowered, both, academically as well as stepping into their post-college career. Are there any kind of tips that you'd like to be able to share with those folks?
Sure. So I think that one of the biggest things is to really be confident, to really not be afraid to say yes to new challenges, to be willing to take risk, and have the confidence to go do that. That, I think, is very empowering in itself. The first time you do that, if you haven't done that before, it's an amazingly self-empowering, because you see that it's not so hard to say it, and it's not so hard to actually accomplish something like that. So that's my first piece of advice. The other thing that I would do is say, really stick together. Maybe find a support group of your peers as you're going through both school and once you're in your career. people that will have similar experiences as you and basically form a support group to help learn how others are dealing with some of the same issues you might have, being a female in the profession. And I would also say to continue to do those informational interviews with women that are further along than you. And just through that natural course of conversation, I believe you can find a mentor, a woman who is excited about your excitement for what you're doing and things you're thinking about and how you can add value in the technology space. And they'll take you under your wing as a real mentor. So I think those things are really important and are going to be one of the keys to really keeping young women in this profession that I feel is so critical for female independence and confidence and earning a good living and all the rest of it, along with the great diversity it brings to IT. I think women's brains work differently than men's brains in some very biological ways, and I think those things really add value to the whole industry. And so, and I believe that a lot of other women are thinking that as well. And so there'll be people ahead of you that will be willing and want to mentor you. So
that's great.
That's what I would recommend.
Yeah. So in addition to that, what are some of the resources that maybe folks could start looking into today? If they have a short-term goal or even a long-term goal,
Sure.
There's a lot of great resources out there. What would some of the recommendations be that you have?
Yeah. So I would say start to join national organizations, even if all that you're really doing at first is getting newsletters from them. Like there's one called NCWIT, and it's the National Council of Women in Technology. And then they, you can go as extreme as you want with it. They have some things that end up being, they'll have local chapters, state and local chapters that you can become more involved in. They have a national conference every year that may or may not be cost prohibitive depending on where it is, but that's a great way to meet a lot of people quickly in the industry at all different levels, and to listen to women that have been in technology for a long time and hear their suggestions and recommendations as far as you gaining knowledge and finding your way through your career. And there are other women's organizations like that. I think that the easiest thing to do, quite honestly, is to literally Google your city, your state name, and women in technology, and see what some of those organizations are. Again, getting involved in maybe your particular interests, like I had mentioned, that PHP user group. So if that's a language you're coding in, go be a part of that. You'll meet other women doing the same thing. You'll meet some men doing the same thing and gain support that way as well.
It really, things that you can get started on today. It's not...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there that you can literally, either in your lunch break today or after work or after class, sit down and just start kind of researching. That's great. So, before we actually get into kind of the standard questions that we ask each guest, I want to go back to, that number that you had indicated earlier of the 2.4 million unfilled jobs, by 2018, which, it's bizarre to say that 2018 is really just not that very far away.
I know.
So, there's just tremendous opportunity there, and to have an industry that has a higher demand than supply. You definitely don't want to get into an industry that you don't have passion for, but it's great news for folks that are going down, especially the academic path, but also folks that maybe are looking to make a career transition. For them, that there are going to be continued opportunities in this specific area, and that if there's an interest for it, it won't hurt to actually dive into that a little bit further.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that people should really realized too, in regard to that big number, is I think that some people are afraid to go into technology because they think that it means, I don't know, they think that it means they have to be super technical, very into math. They might need to count bits and bytes. And I think that most people hear technology and they just think of the hardest core, very technical jobs. And the reality about the technology industry is there's so many different opportunities in it that you could be someone that doesn't think you're very technical, but you really love design, and you could become a graphic artist, and you could be doing front-end web development as you learn, or front-end design, user design. There's so many different areas. And so I think that's something that the industry really needs to get better at educating young people early. And I see a lot of people trying to do that even at the elementary school level. So it's amazing the opportunities that are out there. It's going to be hard on these companies that can't fill these positions. And it just makes everything move a little bit slower. And I know that from personal experience as well. It's tough to hire people. So yeah, incredible opportunities for current students and recent graduates. Really awesome opportunities.
Yeah. So even if you don't feel like you're in a traditional technical career or studying technology in the traditional sense academically, opening up the door just to even kind of consider a creative approach to technology, like you said, with design or linguistics, right? There's got to be amazing opportunity there. So perhaps something that is considered traditionally non-technical, there's got to be room for it somewhere. And it's just finding that the right place for you as the individual for your custom career.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation, and actually one that we'd love to be able to continue the conversation further. And, especially with your passion around this and the work that you're doing, both within your community, but just overall, and the resources that you have available through College Recruiter and just the conversations that you're willing to have is fantastic. And we'd love to be able to continue the conversation with you. So looking forward to future conversations with you. Before we wrap things up, we've got a couple of questions that we ask each guest, and it's a little bit more on the lighthearted side, but, kind of peeling back the layers a little bit further on Faith. So do you mind sharing with listeners what your first job was and what were some of the fundamentals that you learned in that job that you still use today?
Sure. So are you asking about my first professional job or my first job ever?
Well, it's actually interesting because we've actually had people answer both, meaning that, some people have, like, my very first job was at McDonald's. Certainly wasn't my first professional job, but as a teenager, that was. And there are some fundamentals that I still use today that McDonald's taught me way back when.
Right. Well, yeah, and you know what? I can throw out both really quick. I think one of my first jobs was working in a place like a McDonald's. It was not a chain. But I would say one of the things I learned in that kind of job and a couple of my other jobs that were similar to that while I was a student was how important customer service is. And I think that has stayed with me for all of my career, whoever my customer is. When I worked in some of those larger companies, my customers were actually internal. They were other employees of the company, but they were my customers for what I was doing in IT to support them. And by always having that view and seeing it from the non-customer side and then being a customer, of course, I just really have always valued that very, very much. The other job was that first computer programming job at Ford Motor Company. That was my first professional job. And I would say the biggest thing I learned about in that job, two things. One was actually that so much of what you learn in school, what I learned specifically for that job in school, like how to do computer programming in certain languages, was such a small part of my entire job. And I was really surprised by that. And that was because what happens when you get into the workplace that's much different is there's so much more around using your communication skill, reaching out to different departments, more problem solving that isn't directly related to the actual code and technology, but working with other areas within IT to solve problems. So there was a lot more to it than I thought. And that was, I think that's eye-opening to always realize that as you move forward in new jobs and new careers and try to see them holistically. And the other thing in that job was that I also learned something that stuck with me from an IT profession. And I use it and I tell my employees this, and it's one thing hard about being in IT, and that is that you always can only meet expectations because everybody expects computers to always work. And so you can know that early on. So when they break, it's it's automatically a bad thing. You can be up 99% of the time. If you're down 1%, that's all that your users really think about. But if you keep that perspective and you communicate well in your job, you can get people you're working with to realize that's not always a valid assumption. And it helps you it'll take you a long way in your career to really have that dialogue and be open about those sorts of things.
That's great.
When it comes to technology.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the reality, right? Like.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't change it.
Yeah. That's great. So Faith, what have you read or listened to or even watched recently that you'd recommend to our listeners?
So the biggest thing is because of this new lean-in circle that I'm starting. I would say, first of all, for all the women out there and the men, because I think it will make them more aware of what happens, is to go watch that TED Talk by Sheryl Sandberg. It takes 18 minutes. And listen to what some of her findings are around even her own biases that she didn't realize she had. And I think will be really eye-opening. And it's also very encouraging. It will give women who are unsure some confidence. And that's one tool I would use a lot. I know that it depends on people and how busy they are, but for me, I really love to use TED Talks as a way to learn about different things. Just by going on to TED and Googling and searching and looking for topics that are of interest to me, both professionally and personally. And then what happens from there is if something really turns you on, then you can go look for the resources to really dive into it more. So I really see that as a great tool.
Well, and as it relates to the TED Talk, right? Just investing 20 minutes in your day to set aside to watch an 18-minute, talk. And obviously Cheryl has the book that supports that, or maybe the talk actually supported the book. But to take 18 minutes to determine whether you actually wanted to learn more about that, everyone can find 20 minutes in their day, whether they're in their car, listening to it, and obviously not watching it, on their commute, or, 20 minutes before dinner, sit down and really invest that 20 minutes in yourself, to be able to walk away from that very short period of time and understand where you want to go from there. That's great. So, Faith, if you were sitting down having a cup of coffee with your 90-year-old self today, what do you think she'd say to you?
I think this question is quite clever. I think the biggest thing that she would say to me is she's glad that I said yes. That I said yes over and over again, which really is a way for me to say that I didn't let fear get in the way, that I took risks and believed I could do the things that I wanted to do, and I'm better for it. Was I always successful? No, but I was better for it. I learned more. I listened more. I had better relationships because of being willing to do that.
I love that. Glad that I said yes. I love it. Well, we might actually have to quote you on that one, if that's okay, because, I think a lot of people would just want to have their 90-year-old self say, I'm glad you said yes. That's great. I love that, Faith. Okay.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. So let's truly wrap things up with how listeners can contact you directly, learn more about you and the work that you're doing, and maybe start a conversation.
sure. So I think the easiest way to reach me is just by emailing me at faith@collegerecruiter.com. Another way to learn more about me and what we do and really get to understand our business, which is College Recruiter, helping people get into their first careers. So internships and entry-level jobs, that's what our site is about. And we have a great blog that gives lots of information for men and women on how to get started, how to network, how to interview, what are some of the careers out there. So I would highly recommend that they go to collegerecruiter.com and start looking at that stuff as well. I can also be reached on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I am happy to have start a conversation,
Right.
and maybe introduce you to other people.
That'd be awesome. Well, we'll actually have your contact information in the show notes, so people can actually find those direct links to all of the great ways to get in contact with you. And we like I said earlier, we just want to keep the conversation going, just starting the conversation and then seeing where it leads from there. That's awesome. Well, Faith, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. We love the work that College Recruiter is doing. We love to hear the passion that you have. This is something that's near and dear to your heart, and you're actually just wanting to kind of share your knowledge and experience with others that are stepping into this and making sure that they don't feel like they're going it alone. I love that. We're not doing this all on our own, right? There's strength in numbers,
Right.
and reaching out to the people that have done it before us is one of the great first steps. So thank you again. As I mentioned, we'll actually have more information about Faith and all the great work she's doing in the show notes at thecareerq.com. And we will be back with another episode, so stay tuned. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, and we'll catch you next time on The Career Q.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q podcast is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at Jack Straw Cultural Center in the lovely Seattle, Washington.